Ladies and gents, PepperBelly back again with more Interstellar Marines, and I want to talk about the recent hotfix for update 23, which addressed many of the bugs people were experiencing, although crashes are still prevalent for some people, all of which will be in the changelog linked in the description of this video. Instead, as you can probably guess, I'll be talking about the weapon handling tweaks that managed to make its way into the hotfix. If you guys have been actually following my Interstellar Marines update videos, you'll probably know who Spectre is. I talked about him quite a bit since update 22. He's the community manager and, more importantly, the combat systems game designer for 0 Point Software, and he's been single-handedly tweaking and adapting the weapon handling to give a more realistic and authentic portrayal. And after update 23, I actually managed to talk with him in-game and discuss how one of the things that bugged me from my video in update 22, which I discussed back then, if you recall, was the horizontal weapon sway caused by strafing. To reiterate what I said in that video, I was discussing how it was very unrealistic the way your weapon would behave just by strafing, even when you're moving at the slowest possible speed, because the muzzle would kind of delay and fall behind for like no particular reason. It kind of just seemed like you were moving so quickly that you couldn't keep the weapon straight. It kind of gave you that illusion that there was so much inertia that you couldn't keep the weapon focused and pointed straight, which isn't realistic at all, because in real life, your left hand, your support hand, is going to be doing that. The weapon does not move side to side that much just from simply walking sideways. So I was discussing this with him, and we basically talked about how, yeah, we kind of both wanted to see how the game would feel if we were able to mitigate or completely remove that horizontal strafing sway, like that penalty of strafing from the game. And he managed to achieve it. He managed to play around with it a bit. He got rid of, I think he said 1/3 of it, so there's still a little bit there, but not enough to really penalize the player simply for strafing sideways. Now, one thing I have noticed is that because there's still a little bit of inertia there, like the way the weapon sways horizontally from strafing, if you strafe left and right really quickly, you will notice it. It'll still be there, which is perfectly fine for me, because in real life, anyway, you can't strafe back and forth that quickly. It's like nearly impossible, especially to keep your weapon pointed straight. You can't do it. So having that inertia there to kind of penalize the idea of strafing back and forth really quickly, like you're playing CSGO or any other Twitch shooter, is fine. But if you're strafing in one particular direction, like say you're walking forward and you want to cover or slice the pie, as some people will say, when you're coming around a corner and you want to strafe to be able to get you that nice round turn while you're keeping your sight picture pointed on the corner, it will not interfere drastically with your sight picture placement. It'll actually look like it hasn't moved at all, because now there really is no penalty. It only really comes into effect whenever you apply drastic momentum in either direction, as if you're strafing back and forth repeatedly. So this actually makes the game feel, in my mind, a million times better. I love it a hell of a lot more how it is right now, because the controls feel tighter. When I pop out of cover to engage a target, it no longer delays and falls behind. I have to wait for the sight picture to reset center of my screen so I can begin to engage. I can walk and strafe while engaging, which is very realistic, because that's, you know, you walk sideways. You can turn the weapon in your shoulder as you're rotating your torso to be able to cover different arcs while you're moving in one direction. Interstellar Marines made it pretty much so if you didn't want to have any penalty of your horizontal sway, you have to be walking straight only. You weren't able to strafe, which was a very problematic thing, because it made it impossible to slice pies or to come around corners or to breach and enter rooms very efficiently. So it's a lot better now, and I'm pretty happy about it. One thing I have noticed, though, is that when you're not using the sight picture, so when you're not aiming down your sights and you just have the weapon in your shoulder and you strafe back and forth, it still gives you that penalty fully, as if it never changed. So you'll actually see the difference now, because when you actually aim down your sight picture and you strafe back and forth, you'll notice it's diminished, but as soon as you go back to having the weapon in your shoulder and you do it again, and even if you turn on your laser, it's more noticeable then, you'll see just how much the muzzle kicks left and right simply from strafing, and it makes it very difficult to obviously be able to move and shoot, which is supposed to be difficult to a degree, but not because of penalties like that. It's supposed to be difficult because natural movement of the weapon, which they have right. If you're walking straight and you see the weapon bobbing, how much the laser or the muzzle drifts is pretty accurate to how it would be in real life. So that is good. But the horizontal sway, just because of momentum, which there isn't enough to really administer that level of muzzle drift, it just doesn't make any sense. So I would like to see the ability to tone it back even when you're not using your iron sight, if it's possible. I'm not entirely sure. I know it's a little bit more complicated than simply changing a variable, because it could be tied to like character animations and other things. I remember we were discussing this. And again, he managed to achieve it, so hopefully he can do something about that as well. But this also brings me to the next point that I want to discuss, because all of this is great so far. Everything is almost perfect, except for one tiny thing I'm kind of noticing more and more now, which didn't really affect me that much in the past, but now I'm starting to realize, because of the way the weapons are handling, it'd be so much better if this was addressed, and that would be the actual sensitivities of the mouse when you're using the sight. Because the sight, whether you're using the red dot or the 3 times magnified sight on the assault rifle, they all have the exact same sensitivity. There's no uniform aiming there. So if I'm looking through my magnified optic and I'm looking left and right, it's really, really fast. But then if I'm looking through my red dot, it's really slow, even though it's moving the exact same amount of degrees. Like for me, if I'm aiming down my sight and I do a full right swipe by flicking my wrist, it'll turn my sight picture about 90 degrees. It does the same thing whether it's magnified or not. The only difference, because the sight is magnified, it gives the illusion that it moves faster, as if the sensitivity is higher, because there is no uniform aiming there. So they got to do something about that in the future, where using your red dot, which has minimal FOV zoom, should be roughly the exact same as if you're not using a sight at all. The sensitivity should be identical. It should be like exactly what you would expect, where if I'm aiming down my sights or I'm not, or if I'm using iron sights, sensitivity shouldn't change, because FOV shouldn't be changing that drastically to really dictate having that poor of a mouse sensitivity. Whereas if you're using higher magnified optics, it'll obviously, based on the FOV values, scale it back, your sensitivity, to fit more realistically with what you're doing. I would personally love to see that, because it would help to really flesh out actually moving, especially with this new addition that made the horizontal sway diminished. It would really make the idea of keeping your weapon sights up while you're clearing a room, pieing corners and all that stuff, it would feel a lot better now if the sensitivity actually matched that of your point shooting stance, or not having your sights up in your vision. But anyway, other than that, it's a great improvement. I know Spectre wanted me to tell him whether or not it was good. I'm telling you, it's amazing. However, again, the hip firing or the shoulder firing when you're not aiming down your sight, if it's possible to tweak that as well, just because you could see that it's very, very different in how the weapon actually behaves there versus the actual sight picture up in your vision. So, it's great. I'm really happy with it. I know eventually that the weapon systems and the weapon handling will be completely reworked. I know this is something we also discussed, how eventually they're going to have to redo pretty much everything, which isn't a terrible thing, because I think especially with Spectre on board, which is like the greatest thing, being a Marine veteran, he has real world experience. Before, in the past, Kim, which was the founder, would like reference my videos and other people's videos who discuss weapons, because I was, everyone knows I have well, those of you who have actually been subscribed to my channel for a long time know I have real world military experience in the Canadian Armed Forces. So I would kind of help explain in my videos how you can improve or make the weapons feel more realistic and authentic to give a more accurate portrayal. And now Spectre is actually able to really do it. Like he's there. He has personal experience, so now he can pretty much do everything I've been asking for, because we both have exactly the same idea of what is realistic. Because anyone who's ever handled a firearm or a weapon is very well aware of what it feels like to actually do so. So now he's actually able to go in there and tweak the variables, do everything himself, and really make it feel a lot more fleshed out. And as I've been saying in my videos since update 22, everything feels much better now, especially now. Like, every single one of these updates where Spectre tweaks it, it just gets better and better and better. So if they have to rework the weapon systems from scratch at some point in the future, I am perfectly fine with that. If Spectre's like spearheading it, just like let him do what needs to be done to give the most realistic representation of weapon handling. Once that is done, it's going to be pretty damn incredible, because as I've said, although the game lacks a ton of content and has pretty much nothing going for it right now, which I'm just being honest, it doesn't have a lot in the game. It's still being in development, they're still building the foundation, the core tools and assets to really develop the game later on. The shooter mechanics right now, as it stands, are among the best I've encountered. And they're getting better because they're managing to make it feel very authentic, which is what you want in a game that's trying to go for a realistic representation of being a soldier or a special forces operator. It's doing an excellent job of letting you know, without artificial cone of fires and all this other nonsensical gaming mechanics. It's giving you a realistic representation through actual realistic means. And that's what I absolutely love about Interstellar Marines. Where the muzzle's pointed is where the bullets will go. And that's a good thing, because that's how it is in real life, right? What causes a grouping, what causes bullet spread, is where your muzzle is drifting. Has nothing to do with bullets curving in the air, as I've discussed many, many times with cone of fires in the past. I'm just saying, the drift of the muzzle, however minor, tiny degrees it moves, or millimeters or whatever, that can actually change and alter the course of the round, where it lands, the further away the bullet lands. So the further away it is, the more drastic that gap between where your weapon was pointed, that angle the weapon fired at, will change the size of the grouping. So anyway, it's a whole other discussion. I've already discussed it. I actually made a video about this, discussing like replicating weapon recoil in a past video to make it more accurate and how certain games do it. And I talked about Interstellar Marines and Ground Branch and Squad and a bunch of other games, even Ghost Recon 1. So if you want more information on that and you haven't even seen it, go watch that video. But otherwise, phenomenal update. Things are getting better. I'm really, really liking it. And yeah, controls feel tighter. Everything's just better. So that pretty much wraps up the video, guys. My name's been PepperBelly. Thank you guys for joining me today on this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one.